Hello and welcome to another episode of Photoshop for Photographers with me, Sam. Today we're going to be looking at how to sharpen your image in Camera Raw and how to sharpen your image within Photoshop itself. Now, sharpening is achieved by adding halos to the edges of your image. Generally it's done by adding a lighter halo on one side of the edges and a darker halo on the other, which sort of creates this illusion of sharpness. Now, you can adjust the clarity within the general sort of basic Camera Raw setting. It does adjust the clarity, but I wouldn't really recommend it as your only sort of form of sharpening. I always use sort of two-part sharpening. You do the pre-sharpening, or sort of capture sharpening as it's called, in the beginning, which I always do in Camera Raw, and then you do your output sharpening at the end, which is more sort of done with sharpening masks and filters, but we'll get into that. But yeah, I always do two parts to sharpen my images. It just makes them very crisp. So we're going to be working with the details panel first of all, and this is the third icon. It looks like a triangle and then sort of a blurry triangle behind it, so we just click on that. Now then, the details panel, we've got sharpening and noise reduction. The first four sliders we're going to be looking at are the amount, the radius, the detail and masking. Now, the amount and radius are very important in my opinion, probably more important than the others, because they control how much sharpening is applied and how it's distributed. So if we just zoom into 100%, this is a tip I always recommend as well when you're sharpening or blurring or doing anything like that with your image, so you can really see what you're doing. And also when you print out your image, if you've done it working with it at 100% like this, you're going to be more accurate with the results, whereas if you were doing it where you weren't sort of zoomed into that percentage. So the amount first of all. The amount slider is like a volume control. As you can see, it increases the amount of detail. To really see this, if you hold down Alt on your keyboard, it will put the image into a grayscale. And if we just go from 0 up to 150, which is its maximum, you can see the change in detail. I wouldn't recommend having it at very low or very high, because very high it has a lot of noise, and very low it's not effective at all. So if we have it, I don't know, about 60, 67, 65, there we go. Next is the radius. Now the radius controls how much width the halos, how sort of thick they are. You can see here, if I go from 0 up to 3.0, how thick the halos get. I wouldn't recommend going less than sort of 1 or more than 1.5. Generally 1.3 seems to be effective here. The next two sliders down, detail masking, act as the suppression control. They target the effect where it's most needed. Again, if you hold down Alt to adjust the detail, you can see here how it works. The detail slider suppresses the halo effect and increases the detail with the edges. For a portrait image, I'm going to do about 39 because that looks about right. And then here with the masking, if I just go from 0 all the way up, you can see the edges that are being masked and being sharpened. Again, have it somewhere in the middle, just so it's effective, but not too much. The next section down, we have the noise reduction. Within this, we have the luminance slider, the luminance detail slider, the luminance contrast slider, the color slider, and the color detail slider. Now, the luminance is used to smooth out the speckled noise that is always present within images to some degree. Now, you don't want this to be moved too high or too low again, to sort of where it is generally is quite a good spot, because if it's too high or too low, it's going to have a weird sort of contrast between the sharp and the sort of soft. Next slider down is the luminance detail. This acts as a threshold control for the main luminance. If you move it left, it gets smoother, and if you move it right, the image will get sharper. But I wouldn't recommend moving it too far from 50 unless it's complementary to your image. Next down, we have the luminance contrast. Now, when luminance noise is created, it tends to have a flattening effect on the macro level. Therefore, the luminance contrast allows you to restore sort of more contrast at a macro level. That's quite complicated, and you can't really see what it's doing. but it is important. Next down we have the colour and the colour detail. The colour slider smooths out all the colour noise artifacts that occur within your image, and the colour detail slider allows you to sort of preserve the colour detail on the edges of your image. So I'm happy with that. Let's just zoom out. Yeah, I'm happy with that. The image looks good. Sharp where it should be sharp, smooth where it should be smooth on his face. So I want to save that as a preset, and I was working on another portrait image, and I thought, oh, you know, I really need to sharpen this image quickly. I know what good sharpening looks like. Well, you can save it. So if you go into this drop down here and click Save Settings, you can tick or untick anything along here that you would like to be saved or that you wouldn't like to be saved. So I'm just going to click on Save because I'm happy with that. And then you need to save it as an appropriate name. I'm just going to call this one Sharpen Portrait, and click Save. And then if you go into your presets within Camera Raw, I've got one called Highlights there, which I've done previously, and there is Sharpen Portrait. So if you just click on that, and if it wasn't done, it would sharpen it in the way that this image is sharpened right now. So I'm happy with that. I'm now going to open my image. So that is our capture sharpening done. I'm now going to show you how I output sharpen a lot of my images, or how I have done in the past. So if I always go Control J to copy the layer, I'm now going to go into Filter and Sharpen. I'm going to start off with a Smart Sharpen. Now the good thing about this is it works in the same sort of way that we've been working within Camera Raw. It has the radius and the amount. Again, you don't want to go too high because it just looks just doesn't look right. If I have it about there, just so I can show you as an example, I'll just zoom in more. Again, there you can see it's quite a stark difference. I mean, even if you zoom out, that's a stark difference in the sharpness. Now if you do something like this and you feel it's too sharp, you can either delete the layer, or you can go into sort of half, go into sort of the opacity here, and make it half as strong, put it on 50%, or put it on 75%, and it just sort of weakens it, but it still retains that sharpness that you've put in. So that's quite a good way. Another way that I used to use, I don't use this way much anymore, but it's good to just sort of teach people it. Oops, sorry, it's Smart Sharpen. No, we want Filter, Sharpen, and an Unsharpened mask. This can be quite effective. Just adjust the three sliders here, the amount, the radius, and the threshold. Adjust it until you get what you look like. You get what you'd like, sorry. Just zoom in here, and you can see this is more of a slight sort of subtle sharpen. It's not as sort of dominating as the previous one. And one more way that I use to output sharpen my images, which is probably the way that I use most of all, it involves copying the layer first of all, and then you change the layer mode, or sort of screen mode, you change it to overlay. Now I know this looks stupid at first, but you have to persevere. If you click Filter, Other, High Pass, and then it gives you this high pass filter. Now that's too, obviously you can make it very high, that's too high. Now if I normally make about 4.5, actually 3, yeah, 3.7 looks good. Just zoom in. If I turn this on and off, see that stark sharpness, but that sharpens, that's really got all the edges now. So that's got his eyes, that's got his beard, the cracks in his hand look sharp, and when you print that, that's going to look unbelievably sharp. People always come up to me and say, oh, how have you got your images so sort of stark and sharp? I say, I've edited them a little bit, I've used post-production techniques, and then they sort of give me a blank stare. But this is the way you do it. You've got I've shown you how to do capture sharpening and the output sharpening, and then this is the sort of end result. You've got a very crisp, very clear image within Photoshop. I've been Sam with exploretravelphoto.com. Please check out my website. It's got loads of other video tutorials on it, and it's got blogs on it by me, and it's got my photography, most importantly. So please give that a look, and give this video a like,